listening more and more to CEOs, and that's influencing his decision-making, pushing him to the left. I want to bring in Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace. Chris, a lot of anxiety, and it began after those 59 Tomahawk missiles in retaliation in Syria, and it's built up this week from some core Trump supporters that you're kicking Bannon out and you're listening to the wrong people, including these business leaders.
Well, I'm not entirely sure of that. I think that in the end, this president sinks or swims with a lot of even his core supporters on the issue of the economy and getting jobs back for American workers, particularly in rural areas, particularly in the Rust Belt. And look, President Trump tried it the Bannon way at first with the Obamacare repeal and replace, and that didn't go anywhere. And I think this is a president who's looking for success, looking for deals, and if one strategy didn't work, he's looking another way. Meanwhile, clearly, it's so interesting to watch in Washington to see people anointed. I mean, in the beginning, it was all about Steve Bannon. He made the cover of Time magazine, which I suspect was not particularly helpful in terms of his standing with the president, who counts the number of times he's been on the cover of Time magazine. But right now, the it boy in this administration is Gary Cohn, the head of the National Economic Council, former head of Goldman Sachs. Big stories in all the papers this week about how he has put together a really solid expert staff on tax reform, on infrastructure at the NEC, and that the president is listening to him. And, of course, it doesn't hurt that Cohn is allied with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law.
Yeah, I mean, he's brought in 24 policy experts, many of them with Washington experience. So he brought in a team, and they've circled the wagons, if you will. But having said that, Steve Bannon has a large group of folks who do believe in his economic nationalism, that should be the core, if you will, of any America First agenda. So I know things change rapidly in Washington, D.C., even more so with this particular administration. Should President Trump be concerned that if Bannon is no longer with the White House at all at some point?
Well, that's an interesting question. If Bannon were to leave, then the issue is, and of course Bannon has the support of the Mercers, who have a lot of money. Would he become an opponent of this president? Would he turn on him and say that he had moved too far to the center? And you know, there's an old argument, I'm going to try to clean this up, but Lyndon Johnson talking about J. Edgar Hoover when he took over as president in the mid-'60s, saying, I'd rather have him in the tent out rather than outside the tent in. So you can try to fill in the blank there. Okay. And so, you know, that might be a calculation that Donald Trump makes, that he'd rather have Steve Bannon in the tent, even in a reduced role, rather than outside directing fire in. Right. But, you know, Steve Bannon gets a vote in that as well, and whether he's going to want to stay in if he sees that he's losing all the arguments in the White House. It's very interesting, though, and, you know, to some degree there's a kind of Game of Thrones quality to this, and Washington loves the parlor game of who's up and who's down. And one of the interesting names that's being mentioned is Stephen Miller, who the 31-year-old who was a speechwriter and was really, I think, the prime architect, along with Steve Bannon, of the president's very strong America First inaugural address, just a little over 2 months ago. They were seen as being joined at the hip, and President Trump used to refer to the two Steves. But it seems that Stephen Miller has jumped ship and extricated himself from Stephen Bannon and is now on the Gary Cohn side and working also with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner on a bunch of their initiatives. And it's interesting to say which way the wind blows inside the White House. It
really is. Quickly, we've got less than a minute, but I do have to ask you about the mother of all bombs. How does that change the dynamics of foreign policy?
Well, look, I don't think that this was specifically authorized by Donald Trump. They make a big issue of the fact that they say that they are no longer micromanaging the Pentagon as Barack Obama did. They say they give a lot more control to the Pentagon and to the commanders in the field. And I think this call was made by General Nicholson, the head of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Having said that, White House is not at all shy about the fact that this sends a message about this president and his willingness to project U.S. force that they hope is heard in the capitals of Iran and Syria and especially North Korea this weekend.
Well, speaking of edited comments, President Trump promised to bomb the you-know-what out of ISIS. Chris Wallace, thank you very much.